I'm about to make chipping around the green much better and easier for you. If you're standing with your chip shots where your feet are aiming a little bit left, on the flat lie, that's okay. But what happens on an uphill lie, it basically causes us to dip our shoulders back a little bit too much this way, causing us to hit the bottom of our arc, our low point, moving too far forward. So then we try and manipulate. Or if we open up the club face, we can end up sort of digging in the heel of the club that way. So I want to give you just a little tweak to your setup. I want you to picture hitting a draw with your wedges. Might sound a little bit odd, but a draw, rather than trying to hit cut spin, a cut digs into the slope. A draw, an in-to-out path, is going to brush up the slope a little bit more. And that's the sensation that I want you to have, to feel like we are just brushing the grass, following the slope. The more we cut across it, the more we're going to dig in. The more we brush the slope, digging in, out to in, is going to hit the ball this way. But in to out, it's very hard to actually have that leading edge dig into the ground, you see? So we're putting a little draw spin on it, and we're following this slope a little bit more. We're following the slope this way rather than digging into it this way. That's the concept. And when we adjust our setup a tiny bit, and with that feeling in our mind, you're going to be surprised at how good your chip shots are. If you keep watching, I'm going to give you one of my favorite little bonus tips that really does cut so many shots off people's scores, and it's stupidly easy. What I love about this, it works very quickly. I give it to students all the time in playing lessons as well, because people just don't think about it. So instead of your regular setup with your stance being open and tilting your shoulders up this way, we're going to do these couple of things. We're going to stand a little bit closer. We're going to raise that handle up just a little bit. That's going to produce a little less drag, but I'm actually going to pull my right foot back a touch here, okay? And I'm going to feel like my hands are, instead of lifting up outside, they're going to feel like they are much more nearer my thighs this way. So the path is almost a little bit like a in to out putting stroke, but I'm very subtle with an out to in path. There's my target, but my feeling is actually really going out right past the flag. I'm kind of following my feet. I like the ball to be a little bit further back with this, but you can certainly test it out being a little bit further if that gives you a bit more authority to accelerate through and kind of get your chest to the target rather than pushing it this way, because getting it further back sometimes can cause a little bit of this action. So if you find you're feeling a little bit restricted when doing it, try moving the ball further forward. But let's say we just go pretty neutral rather. I've got my trail foot back. I'm matching the slope that we talked about earlier, but I'm hitting this little soft draw. And it's not just my path going back, I'm actually allowing the hands to release, to turn over just a little bit. So I want to release and feel like the club head is actually passing the hands and turning over, creating a little bit of hook spin, just like so. That's your little checkpoint. I don't want to be digging up, I don't want to be lifting up, I don't want the face to be wide open. I'm just adding a little bit of draw. So let's put that into action. I'm trying to picture a draw. I've got my landing spot. That's all I'm thinking about. I'm going to do my little mulligan rehearsal, pulling my right foot back, nice soft arms but firm grip, raising the handle, and I'm just allowing the club to release through, but keeping it close to my body. And what you'll find is the little strikes that you get are very reliable. This little trick is about the arms. And what I'm doing on the setup, you saw it on the first one, which I didn't do well, and the bunker shot and on here, as I set up to the ball, all right, it's not the feet, it's not the clubs, it's not the hands, it's the arms and my arm position. What I'm doing is a little bit different to what most of you tend to do when you're setting up to little pitch shots, chip shots. You set up with your body in place, your hands sort of pressed forward a little bit, okay? But the thing I want to point out most is the shape that I have with my arms, and also the lack of connection that I have with my arms to my body. So there's two things I want to point out. When we have a bit of air here, that's going to affect our movement in the fact that we're not going to have a reliable sequence. Sometimes the body is going to go a little bit more. Sometimes the hands are going to go a bit more. Sometimes the arms are going to go without the body. And that all changes not just the contact reliability, but the ball flight reliability. So it becomes very hard to have a consistent, confident short game. And what we actually really want is to find a way that gives us a blend of connection, something that we can repeat very, very easily, and that can apply to all shots, pitch shots, bunker shots, and greenside shots. And all I want you to do is so simple, but it's very annoying how good it is. So I'm going to show you what I do first, and then I explain why it's so effective. All I'm going to do is take my hand position, and I'm going to turn over my arms here. Okay, so I'm rotating my arms. So I'm kind of like doing a bicep curl coming up this way. And I'm going to almost feel like my elbows are coming in to the top of my chest here. And then from there, with that connection, and with my elbows pointing down a little bit more this way, it's going to feel almost like I am keeping my palms up as I swing, my elbows up, but it's like I'm passing like a bag of sand or something like this. I'm in control. And why this works is because the club's not fighting me. I am just moving together my arms, the club, and my body in a nice pattern that is repeatable. It's a nice smooth arc. And you can see just from that alone how repeatable that is all the way through, backwards and forwards. I'm staying connected. I'm not getting too disconnected. Everything is working as needs to together. So what we really want to try and do is actually thin our chip shots. So I want you to start thinking about not trying to get the ball down, not trying to sort of get under it. I want you to try and thin your chip shots, okay? We're trying to get it just below the equator here, just very below. And that objective is going to help you strike the ball correctly, slide up the face, and create that grip and spin that we need, and have that control. So we can basically have reliable spin control, reliable height. And you may never have tried this before because you're always trying different things. So I want you to go out and practice. I'm going to keep it really, really simple to begin with. You're going to put your feet and knees together. So the ball is about middle of your stance in between your feet here. And we're going to do just some little chip shots, you know, only 10, 15 yards or so. I'm not using lots of wrists. I've got a little bit more weight forward, but I'm really hovering the club. I'm hovering the club here just to be able to thin it. That's giving me a signal that I have control. A little trick we can do is actually hover just before we hit the chip shot. This can help calibrate yourself. So from here, I'm trying to strike the middle of the ball and then down afterwards. But I'm not trying to force it down. I'm just trying to catch it nice and clean. And you'll see there, I actually caught it perfectly. So once you get good at that, we can then calibrate our distance control. No matter what happens, you are going to have this scenario where you're just a little bit short of the green, you're on the fringe, fairway, whatever you may want to call it. Now, you can take a less lofted club and bump and run it, and the same kind of principles apply to what I'm going to tell you. So you choose which one you feel more comfortable with. I'm just demonstrating with a sand wedge right now. When we're around the fringe, the thing we need to avoid most is sort of chunking it or trying to help it up. So let's make it simple by turning it more into a putting stroke. You can sort of set up to it like you would a putt, okay, with the same sort of grip. But if you do that, I would suggest you use an 8 or 9 iron. For a sand iron, I'm going to stand a little bit closer to the ball. Instead of being out here, I'm actually making sure that as I stand close, this club is more or less, well, it's more vertical than it is past the 45, okay? So I'm making sure that the shaft is a little bit higher. Why? Bad shots happen when we create too much friction with the turf. This is where we have to time it perfectly and get ball first, then turf. When we raise up the heel by this manner, we actually reduce friction on the bottom. So We use the bounce of the club, but there's less that we have to rely on. So we can basically do a very simple action that is more reliable and has less turf interaction, which means more consistency. The last little thing I'm going to do is actually just feel like I'm using my wrists a lot less. I'm not staying dead rigid with them. I can still feel the weight of the club, but I'm not letting it flop around in this way. I'm feeling a sort of a putting action, but I can accelerate. But when I'm accelerating, I'm not allowing the club to pass. I'm sort of feeling like those thumbs are pointing down always. My thumbs are pointing down. So I stand closer. I raise up those hands. I do a nice simple backswing and keep those thumbs pointing down. It's a much easier technique to just get it close. Just missing the green on some tougher courses, you're going to have some rough around the greens. These get tricky because we have to still accelerate through, otherwise we end up just sort of duffing them short. If the ball is a little bit buried, the technique that we just worked on is not going to work that often, especially if it's sat down a little bit. You'll just end up chunking it, right? So without changing much else about the setup, we're still going to have the feet pretty close together. I've still got a decent hold on the club. We are not having the shaft as steep as we were before. We're not trying to raise up the heel. You can do that way if you're really struggling with this technique, but I would urge you to practice just a smidge to get used to this. Because what we're trying to do, we're trying to make sure we actually allow the club to pass under the ball and through the rough. And we do that by actually releasing it. Now, this doesn't mean that we're jarring it that way. We're not trying to keep the hands far ahead. We're not keeping the thumbs down this way. We're actually just allowing the weight of the club to pass through. Just this nice little momentum. But you notice, I'm not just doing my wrists. I'm not completely letting them buckle. I'm just allowing the weight and momentum to glide underneath. Almost like the golf ball is a flower and we're just trying to cut the stem underneath it. And what that's going to do, when you trust it, you're going to be able to accelerate through, pop that ball up, and pretty much remove the likelihood of just sort of fluffing it a little bit short or even doing the double hit. So we take that setup and we just trust, I'm going to feel that club head pass under the ball and it goes up and around. And every time you can have a nice little chance at saving par. Quick bonus tip. People often forget the necessity of a nice tempo and cadence when it comes to the shorter shots. Don't get snatchy. Don't try and do too slow. Have a nice smooth tempo, just as you would if you were just hand throwing it, tossing it underneath. How would that feel? You wouldn't snatch it this way. You wouldn't be too slow. You would just let the ball throw out your hand nice and smooth. That cadence, that tempo is going to serve you well with every shot around the green. Put those three things into action the next time you play. I promise you, you will consistently shoot better scores when you don't screw up as much. And it's going to give you more confidence when you get to the next tee. If you want to make sure that you don't miss as many greens in the first place, this lesson is going to help you a ton. And yes, it's simple. Thanks for watching.